I'm back reading to you from Hazrat Inayat Khan's The Art of Being and Becoming. I'm back in Greenwich Village in New York in Washington Square Park. One of my favorite places to be because there's so much energy and activity in the summertime. And it's a really chill vibe. It's a lot of students from the area. So, and a lot of local artists and musicians. So, we're going to continue with the chapter called Personality, the Art of Being and Becoming. Purity of life. When a person has arrived at that pitch, he lives in virtue. For him, virtue is not a thing which he expresses or experiences from time to time, but his life itself is virtue. What he says and does and what is done to him is all virtue. And that shows that virtue is not one little experience. Virtue is purity of life. Really, I would not consider virtue a worthwhile thing if it came and went away. It is only worthwhile when it lives with us, when we can depend upon it, and when we can live and move and have our being in it. That is worthwhile. If it only visited us for 1 minute, it would not be a virtue, and we would rather not have it. We would prefer poverty to the wealth which came for a moment and went away. Therefore, this is the stage when man begins to understand what virtue means, when he begins to see a glimpse of virtue. What he knew before he thought to be virtue. But now life in its entirety becomes virtue to him. He lives in it, and life to him means virtue. Properly speaking, it is lack of life that is sin. But then there is a further purity, and that is the purity of freedom from the thought of oneself. By thought of oneself, I do not mean the thought of one's real self, but of one's limited self. Thought of one's limitation covers what is true in one's being, one's true self. It is this limitation that makes one feel bad, that makes one feel at times that I am good or I am bad. In this final phase, one realizes I am perfect, nor does badness make me imperfect. Good and bad do not exist when one is above them, for then one is pure from all shapes and colors, from all forms of life. It is like rising above heaven and hell. It is like touching the throne of God. It is like bathing in the truth of God. This is real exaltation. When one has risen above one's limitation and has become conscious of that perfection whom we call God, whom we worship and whom we love, and who is the ultimate purpose of life. Once again, I have to take a sip. It is hot out here. I love getting these beverages from the shops nearby. It's called Roar Organic, and this is the Mango Clementine. Wow. It doesn't taste sugary, it tastes like stevia. It's not too sweet. Chapter 2, the purification of the mind. The real purification of the mind is in purifying it from the thoughts and impressions which live in it as germs of disease. The best way of cleansing the mind from all this is to empty it of any thought, feeling, or impression. To be pure means to be natural. The spirit in man in its natural condition is not thought but mind, not love but heart. For as the thought is the outcome of the mind, so is love the outcome of the heart. To attain to the purity which is the seeking of the mystic, one must be able to purify one's spirit from every thought and feeling, however deeply impressed or engraved in one's heart. The mystic goes as far as purifying himself from his identity by removing it for a certain time and putting something else in its place. From beginning to end, the whole process of spiritual development depends upon this. All that exists lives on its own element, springs from its own element, and returns to its own element. So earth to earth, water to water, fire to fire, and air to air. Purification means to make a certain object itself with nothing foreign added, nothing attached to it that does not belong to it. These two rules make one understand the process by which the mind can be nourished and purified. It is nourished by thoughts and impressions that are harmonious and productive of beauty and that result in satisfaction. For harmony is the nature of the soul, and beauty is its source and goal. Thus, by harmony and beauty, the mind is nourished, as it is made of harmony and beauty. And the same elements are needed to purify the mind of all desirable thoughts and impressions, harmony as water and beauty as soap, purifying the mind of all thoughts which are void of harmony and beauty. The first thing in purifying the mind is to be able to discern the foreign element there, as all that is foreign to the body does not agree with the body, making it ill. So all that is foreign to the mind disturbs its peace, and that is what proves that it does not belong to the mind. Such things are worry, anxiety, fear, sorrow, or any sort of disturbance that takes away the tranquility of the mind, preventing it from experiencing that joy and peace for which it longs, and in which alone is its satisfaction. There are many who do not know the importance of keeping the mind in a pure and harmonious condition, and the few who do know it find it difficult to bring about better conditions in practical life. In the first place, it is difficult to accomplish outward duties, to answer the demands of life, and yet keep the mind in perfect tranquility. To do this, one needs the knowledge of purifying the mind of all external influences. And the way one can manage it can be said in a few words: to throw away inharmony by the power of harmony, and to wash away all that lacks beauty by preserving the great power of beauty within oneself. Anything that weighs upon the mind, such as a worry, a fear, or a feeling of remorse, keeps the mind below the pitch at which it is meant to be. When the mind is weighed down by anything, however learned a man may be, however capable and efficient, he can work very little. Learning does not help the mind that is not in its right place. So, it is seen to be with many learned people, though most capable and efficient, yet they are incapable of accomplishing anything important in life. This is usually found in life, and rare is the case where it is not so. All the affairs of life are accomplished by the power of mind. External conditions are nothing but mechanisms with which the mind works as an engineer, producing from life all that is desired. Therefore, whatever be one's condition in life, the principal thing is to shake off all that weight upon the mind, thus making it free to fulfill its task through life. Often people find themselves helpless before a difficult situation, but very few stop to think that it is not only the situation that is difficult, but there is some difficulty in one's own mind. One hardly gives a thought to this question, for every man's eyes are fixed upon the difficulty of the situation alone. It is like seeing a wall standing before one, and yet not realizing that one has a hammer in one's hand. If one realized the power that the mind has, whatever was standing before one, not only the wall but even mountains could be removed. Many seek for power from without, ignorant of the fact that all power is hidden within. When by freeing his own mind from all that weighs it down, man realizes the power he inherits from the source of all beings. He will realize in himself an enormous power. The mastermind is the master of life. Purifying the mind from fear is of great importance, and this can be best done by analyzing what causes one fear. Fear is an outcome of long collected unsolved problems. When once a person looks his own problems in the face, he gets an insight into the cause of fear. And as in the sun, many germs are destroyed, so the germs of fear are destroyed by the light of intelligence. Fear comes from weakness in facing the consequences of one's condition, attitude, and deeds. Once a person has solved the problem of how he will meet the consequences, the fear is done with. The best way of getting over the fear of swallowing a bitter pill is to swallow the pill and so to experience that it is not more bitter than it is. Fear comes also by being too cautious with one's health, morals, and reputation, by being too considerate of the feelings of those whom one loves and too regardful of those under whose influence one is, and by taking what others say too much to heart. Fear very often remains in the heart of man in the guise of virtues, and often the timid person is taken for a righteous one. But the timorous well-doer is worse than a fearless sinner. The best practice one can do is to speak with one's own fear, to dispute with it, to root out the reasons on whose foundation it rests. What generally happens is that one fears even to think of all the things one fears. But the solution, getting above fear, lies in analyzing the cause of the fear and so making it non-existent. Man by nature possesses a tremendous power hidden in his heart, a power that waits constantly to become manifest. This power is hidden by fear. The day when fear disappears, this latent power manifests to view. The nature of the memory is to hold an impression, agreeable or disagreeable. Therefore, a person holds a thought in the mind, whether it is beneficial to him or not, without knowing the result that will come from it. He is like a child who holds a rattle in his hand, hits his head with the rattle, and cries at the pain, and yet does not throw the rattle away. There are many who keep in their minds thoughts of illness or thoughts of unkindness done to them by another, and who suffer from it, yet not knowing what it is that makes them suffer so, or understanding the reason of their suffering. They go on suffering, and yet hold on in memory the very source of suffering. Memory must be one's obedient servant. When it is mastered, then life becomes difficult. Someone who cannot throw away from his memory what he does not desire to keep in mind is like a person who has a safe but has lost the key to that safe. He can put money in, but he cannot take it out. All faculties in man become invaluable when a person is able to use them at will. But when the faculties use the person, then he is no longer master of himself. Purity of mind requires the destroying of all bad impressions collected there or received at present. One can destroy these impressions by 5 methods, and the method is chosen according to the impression one has to destroy. Some impressions need to be washed off the mind. Some require to be erased from the surface of the mind. Some have to be shaken off, like dust from one's clothes. Some need to be burnt, like the wood in the fire, which, after its test by fire, turns into ashes. And some impressions must be drowned, so that they will never come up again. Bury certain impressions, like corpses. Find every way of annihilation that is suited to each impression so that your mind may be clear. The mind is not only a means of thinking or reasoning, but the king of one's being, and upon the condition of the mind, one's health, happiness, and peace and life depend. Now the question is what to destroy and what to keep in the mind. Collect and keep all that is beautiful, and destroy all that is void of beauty. Collect and keep all that is agreeable, and destroy all that has a disagreeable effect upon you. Collect and keep all that is harmonious, and destroy all that creates inharmony in yourself. Collect and keep all that is restful, and destroy all that disturbs the peace of your life. As dust gets into the works of a clock and stops the clock, so the effect produced by all impressions that are void of beauty and harmony, and that which disturb your peace, keeps you from progress. The mind cannot act properly when it is hindered by impressions that have a paralyzing effect upon it. Life is progress, and stopping progress is death. Failure does not matter in life. To a progressive person, even 1,000 failures do not matter. He has before his view success, and success is his, even after 1,000 failures. The greatest pity in life is to stand still when life does not move further. A sensible person prefers death to such a life as that. It is a paralysis of the soul, of the spirit, which is always caused by holding bad impressions in the mind. No soul is deprived of happiness in reality. The soul's very being is happiness. Man brings unhappiness upon himself by holding in his hands the clouds of bad impressions, which fall as a shadow upon his soul. Concentration is taught by the mystics in order to exercise the will, making it capable of using all faculties. A person with willpower can remember what he wishes to remember and can forget what he wishes to forget. All things that deprive one of one's freedom in life are undesirable. The mind must be free from all bad impressions of life, which take away life's rest and peace. By concentration, one is able to hold a certain thought one desires and to keep away all other thoughts. And when one is able to keep away all the thoughts one does not wish to have, it becomes easy to throw away the impressions of years if one wishes to forget them. Bad impressions, however old and intimate, are like accumulated rubbish, which should be removed in order to make the house clean. The human heart is the home of the soul, and upon this home, the comfort and peace of the soul depend. The action of every illness or weakness is more manifest in its impression on the mind. There are many people who, after an illness that has lasted some time, become so much impressed by it that the impression remains even after their cure. To those who suffer for many years from an illness, their illness becomes natural. It becomes a part of themselves, and the obstacle to their cure is not the illness, but the impression engraved on their mind. So it is with weakness, or a defect of any sort. Very often a person confesses, "This is my defect, but I cannot help it." If there is any weakness or defect, it is merely in the impression. When a person says, "There are moments when I lose my temper," or when he says, "I would like to tolerate, but I cannot stand that person," his weakness is nowhere but in the impression he has in his mind. Therefore, the best cure for every illness and weakness is denial of the same. Affirmation deepens the impression, and contemplation of it makes it worse. There is no harm in denying one's illness or weakness, for that is not telling a lie, as it does not exist in reality. It is merely a shadow. Truthful confession of something that is unreal is worse than lying. One must first deny that to oneself, and then to others. The Sufi's ideal through life is the realization of God and his perfection. And after realizing his ideal, he cannot say, "I cannot tolerate or endure or stand anybody." And he cannot say that he cannot think, act, or feel as he thinks right. The idea of the Sufi is always to suggest to himself that which he wishes to be, that which he would like to be. And when he finds that he has failed to think, speak, or act as he wishes to, he must think that the condition of the process is to fall several times before one gets one's balance, instead of thinking, "It is my weakness, I cannot do otherwise." Those who walk toward the perfection of power and wisdom take every step forward with new hope and new courage, and weakness to them is a story of the past. It does not exist anymore. They don't recognize such a thing as existing. They can't accept themselves as being what they don't wish to be. They picture themselves as their ideal, what they would like to be. Sometime or other in their lives, if not sooner, later, they certainly succeed in molding their life to their ideal. Not only are there bad impressions that disturb the tranquility of the mind, but many feelings of resentment and resistance against things which do not agree with one's own idea also disturb one's mind. The person who has some business to carry on or some profession requires a tranquil mind, but the one who journeys on the spiritual path needs tranquility of mind most. Prayers, concentrations, meditations have no effect if the mind is not purified from all disturbances. Therefore, for an adept, no cost and no sacrifice are too great for keeping harmony within himself. A Sufi tries to keep harmony in his surroundings. The harmony which demands many sacrifices, it makes one endure what one is not willing to endure. It makes one overlook what one is not inclined to overlook. It makes one tolerate what one is not accustomed to tolerating. And it makes one forgive what one would never have forgotten if it had not been for the sake of harmony. Thanks for listening. May you find lasting happiness. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.